Educational Communications and this station present Environmental Directions with Nancy Pearlman. On this series, we explore the effects of human influence on the Earth's ecosystems and discuss solutions to environmental problems which affect the quality of life on this planet. Environmental Directions gives you the kind of information you need to help you participate in decisions impacting your community, the nation, and the world. Now, here's your host, Nancy Pearlman.
Hello. For the next half hour, we're going to be talking about the environment and history of the Earth of Southern California and the indigenous people with my guest, Susan Suntree. She is a multiple award-winning poet, writer, and performer. She's an environmental activist, recipient of numerous awards, including from the Santa Monica Conservancy and the Sierra Club. She's a former member of the board of directors of Wetlands Action Network. She has also authored numerous books, including Wisdom of the East, Sacred Sites, The Secret History of Southern California, and Dear Traveler. Welcome. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you, Nancy. I'm happy to be here.
I thoroughly enjoyed your audiobook, not having to read about Southern California, but listening to the songs, the music, the myths, the stories of numerous indigenous tribes, and also the origins of our planet. And what I found intriguing was that you started the history of how our Earth was created here in this Southern California area, including the Big Bang Theory.
Yes, it's very important to me to have the full history of a place. We only see what we know. And if it's not in our heads, generally speaking, we can't see what's in front of us because we can't name it. We don't know to even see it. And so knowing the story of a place is how we learn to love it. If we don't know its story, we won't love it and therefore care for it. Los Angeles has a rich, vast history, not only beginning with the very origins of the universe, but also some of the oldest indigenous history in the Americas is right here. Our regional story is so fascinating and dynamic.
In fact, the Native Americans are known to have settled in this area over 15,000 years ago, even though there are discoveries saying it might even go back farther.
Oh yes, the science is not settled on that, but this is an ancient cultural site. In fact, the oldest human body ever found in North America is found on one of the Channel Islands, and it's 13,000 years old. We have a venerable history, but so few people know about it, and so we are easily swayed to call the land real estate and to exploit it instead of care for it as citizens of a place.
In fact, we can appreciate the science of how the continents were created. We know that we're in an area that is constantly shifting because of the earthquakes. The land is constantly changing. The geology is incredible. But human stories of the creation are equally interesting and important. How different mountains, valleys, plants, animals were created originally.
So let me start with this brief reading of the origins of the universe, because for me it was one of the most important things I learned when I was doing this research. So this is from Book 1, Western Science, Part 1, Light, Space, Matter. In the beginning, unutterable, hot. No space, no time, not shape, not size, not taste, not smell, not see, not touch. A singular nothing. Nothing at all. Compressed to a point infinitely dense, but wobbling. 14 billion years ago, colossal bloom. The Big Bang. Seething radiation. No center, no edge. Roiling, gaseous universe soup. Pure energy pops riotous sparks, or the spectral harmonics of minute energy strings, wild infinitesimal bits, the 6 quarks, up, down, strange, charmed, truth, beauty, the 3 electrons, and the 3 little neutral ones, neutrinos, whirl in and out of colliding light, particle annihilating antiparticle, blasting photons at every turn. The first frenzied pips radiate forever into unfathomable mystery. What caused it? Came before it? Into what belly, what field did it blast? Energy to mass, mass to energy, plasma pounding to particles and back to wave, gravity overcome by the speeding expansion and walloping heat. The Big Bang births space as it expands, time as it travels, doubling its size in seconds. Shock waves throb through the plasma, ringing the cosmos like a temple bell. Temperatures falling, the hot whirling slightly cools. Three quarks cling to each other, up, up, down, and settle as protons, positive charge. Three quarks cling to each other, down, down, up, and settle as neutrons, no charge. Electrons settle, negative charge. Forms ripen in nothing singular field. The same proton, neutron, electron throughout space and time. Star, tongue, tear, plastic fork. Our bodies as old as the cosmos.
The power, the energy, the forces that created this earth that seems so calm and quiet to us is important for us to understand and appreciate that it took a lot of various natural forces to create the earth as we know it and we love it.
It's like what the spiritual teachers say, we're all one. Well, guess what? Science approves. We are all one. We're all the same stuff. And that means not just human beings. That means all beings, including rocks and wind and rivers and trees and mountains. And that leads over to the indigenous myths, which make the same claim.
Indeed, the origin stories of humans all over the world focus on how the earth was created in a different way. You feature 7 different tribes of the greater Los Angeles area. Who are those groups, and what origin story can you share with us?
Well, the main groups of Southern California belong to the language family, Uto-Aztecan. It's a very, very large language family in North America and includes the Aztecs and the Hopis and all the tribes of the Southern California basin from the San Fernando Valley to the deserts. This is the range of myths that I cover of origins and cultural practices in this book. But I also include the Southern Chumash and the Ventura area, Santa Barbara South, because they actively interacted with the Uto-Aztecan tribes of the Southern California basin. Of the Southern California basin languages, it's the Tataviam, the Tongva, the Ahashiman, the Luceños, the Cahuilla. Those are the main ones. There's a commonality in their view of the nature of reality, and that is the origins of the universe and of all the things that we see.
Often in those stories that I listened to, there were live beings that became the peaks, the mountains, the trees, and other features that we see in nature.
That's right. The basic story, and it's told in different ways, so as I write in the introduction, the author's note to the reader, there is no such thing as one holy text, which we and many people in the West are used to this idea, but not so in the indigenous cultures here. I was taught by my teachers, the indigenous people who guided me through this process. There's a basic story in the Southern California people, but it's told differently, and it's always inflected to the region where it's told. The basic view is always expressed in terms of place. So if you're near the ocean, the stories will include coastal references. If you live up by the mountains, the origins, myths, and songs reflect a mountain region. But the basic view contained in the songs is the same. So I love that idea because it really emphasizes living in place, understanding where you are in terms of the local picture is a reflection of the big picture.
I have been going to the San Jacinto Mountains in the San Bernardino National Forest for decades. And up in Idlewild at 5,000 feet, you can climb to Taqwish Peak at over 8,000 feet or San Jacinto Peak at over 10,000 feet. I enjoy the views. I enjoy seeing the rocks, the formations, but the stories from the local Native Americans talk about these features differently than we see them. They see these rocks and natural features as former people having been changed into these natural features.
Well, it's not human beings. The term that I've used that seemed to work for everyone is great beings. They're not gods, not in the Western sense. It's hard for us in the West to see the landscape as alive. Let me read a little bit from The Death of the Eagle, and then a little bit from San Jacinto, the great myth of Taqwish.
And this is from your book, Sacred Sites, The Secret History of Southern California.
Yes. The universe was generated by a disequilibrium, a wobbling, very similar to the Big Bang, according to the Luceño story, the Luceño origin song. There was a condition of vacancy and emptiness, and then it basically wobbled, and it began to create form. Those forms became more and more distinct and became everything we see on Earth. The wind, the rocks, everything. And out of that generative condition arose the world as we know it. And these were the first people. So you have to understand that in this worldview, everything is alive. Everything is intelligent. Versus the Western view, in which only human beings are alive and intelligent, and thus sacred. That is, it's holy. It's part of the whole. Out of these original forces came a great leader called Wiot. But Wiot tangled with a very powerful character, frog woman, and she caused him to die. There are various versions of what caused him to die. And then finally, when he died, then out of his death came death. Death came into the world, and various other cultural practices arose from his funeral. Here is a couple of minutes from the story of Eagle. Eagle is one of the great, great characters in the indigenous myth cycle. He's one of the most powerful first people. But Eagle, too, had to die because if Wiot died, we all have to die. And that was really hard for the first people to get a grip on. When the funeral pyre died down, the people gathered Wiot's bones. Sitting together in a council, they discussed what to do with them. While they talked, Eagle, a wise man with great ayelqui, understood what it meant that death was in the world. By the way, ayelqui is a Luceño word that means knowledge power, and it's distributed unequally. Some people have more power and others less, but everybody has some. And knowledge power. Knowledge gives you power. You don't have power without knowledge. So I love that word, ayelqui. While they talked, Eagle, a wise man with great ayelqui, understood what it meant that death was in the world. He decided to find out if there was any way to avoid it. With his great power, he was sure he could fly to the very limits and escape. When Eagle flew north, he found death. When Eagle flew east, he found death. When Eagle flew south, he found death. When Eagle flew west, he found death. Seeing death everywhere, he returned to the center and accepted future fate. He would allow himself as a fledgling to be captured, lovingly tended, danced, killed without his blood being shed, and mourned for 3 days and nights. For all time, there is only one Eagle. Gathering the people, Eagle announced, death is everywhere, death is always close by, death is inescapable, they would have to die, all of them. As Eagle grew sick, he talked to this people about their spirits, telling them that their hearts are the center, and that the breath of life lives there. When death comes early in the morning, when it's not yet light, the spirit flies over a great sea to a gate in the east. Here, it enters the other world, the above and below, to shine as a new star in Taqwish, the Milky Way.
I so look forward to hearing more about the Native American myths and songs of our Southern California ancient origins when we return in a moment with my guest, Susan Suntree, poet, writer, and performer.
Environmental Directions with Nancy Pearlman continues with further discussion of the world's critical ecological issues. For more information, you may call 310-559-9160 or go to www.ecoprojects.org. Now, here's Nancy.
I'm speaking with Susan Suntree. She has authored the book Sacred Sites, The Secret History of Southern California. It's a lovely audiobook. Not only are you involved with writing this, Susan, but you have brought in many important people to share. Peter Coyote, a very famous actor who has been a voice in over 120 documentary films. Ernest Siva, a very famous acclaimed musician, ethnomusicologist, and revered elder of the Morongo Band of Mission Indians, and others. It's quite a collection of song and myth.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, making the audiobook was something that I wanted to do almost from when I first imagined this book, because, of course, it began as a performance. The most important reason to do an audiobook is because this is an oral text. These stories were always sung. They were always performed. This book needed to be restored to the oral tradition, and I was so fortunate to work with my director, Tom Keegan, who's a literally world-famous games director, to work with Peter Coyote, Kalani Kwepo, who joined us for Book 2 and the epilogue. What a remarkable indigenous actor. We had just a wonderful team. Tom Zander, who did the music, worked with Ernest Siva, including Ernest Siva's music and parts of the book. So for me, the audiobook is the paragon of the expression of this story, of the origins of the landscape.
Let's talk about one more place that I have been fortunate enough to visit, and that is a winter solstice site up in the Santa Susana Mountains on the old Rockadine facility. It's where the indigenous people have created a pictograph that has the sun going straight into the circles at the winter solstice.
Yes, that area, which is on the Rocketdyne property, is basically, I consider it the Stonehenge of Southern California. It's an extraordinary site. There's a winter solstice site there that you're speaking of. There is a summer solstice site. There's a photo of it in the book and the story of it in the book. The entire area has petroglyphs and cupules and other symbols of ritual and sacred practice. The irony is that it even exists because the site of the development of the first nuclear power plant that had a meltdown in Southern California, the development of the engines that powered the rockets to the moon. It's such a complicated site. But here is this ritual site with the summer solstice and the winter solstice. And the winter solstice cave is extraordinary. It has multiple colors of paint. It's packed and polished. And there is a solar feature of a shadow that enters the cave during the week before and the week after the winter solstice and puts a shadow finger right on the target at one end of the cave, and then the finger, it hits it like an arrowhead and then drops down into a finger and then slides across the mural to the target, you might say, the ringed feature at the other end of the cave.
The rocks and formations of our mountains are absolutely beautiful here in Southern California. Mm-hmm. But what is also very significant is the Los Angeles River. Most people don't realize it goes over 50 miles because we have channelized it, we have destroyed it, the natural water flow and vegetation of this beautiful river, although there are efforts to restore some of it. You talk about the history of this Los Angeles River.
Yes, the Los Angeles River started flowing 700,000 years ago when the Santa Susana Mountains and Simi Hills rose up due to tectonic action. They were pushed up as the Pacific Ocean plate moving along the San Andreas Fault pressed northwest. But in the book, I particularly characterized the river as it was 50,000 years ago during the last ice age. And it gives us a sense, I think, of the nature of that river. People are really working to restore it, but we often experience it as channelized, just trapped in concrete. But here's what it has the potential to be like. 50,000 years ago, the beach is at Baldwin Hills. The Los Angeles River, flowing since the mountains first rose up, collects from springs and streams pouring off the Santa Susana and Santa Monica Mountains and Simi Hills. Waters collected from Calabasas and Bell Canyon creeks begin the river as we know it, drained in concrete. Flows along the base of the Santa Monica Mountains, or in later, drier eras, sinks into the valley's soft alluvium, flows underground, collects in an underground lake, wells to the surface, and swells, stream-fed by hot springs flowing through the oak forest we name encino, Spanish, oak, through bulrushes and pondweeds thick in the riverside marshes, vibrant with grebes, herons, egrets, swans, geese, ducks, and owls, spreads out after winter rains into floodplains. Balboa Park, green with elderberry, red cedar, walnut, live oak, its paths swathed and softened by wetlands, grows wide along the way, Griffith Park, joined by large streams from canyons in the San Gabriels, Tujunga, Arroyo Seco, and from the Verdugo Mountains, through sycamores, wild white branchlings, and dense willows, vined and brambled with blackberries, raspberries, wild grape, tangling over garter snakes, pond turtles, toads, and frogs, rainbow trout glisten iridescent, swimming with the chubs and the sticklebacks. Breaks toward the coast through a narrow gap between the Elysian and Puente Hills, meanders south between steep sycamore and oak-forested bluffs we name downtown Los Angeles, Boyle Heights, sheltering songbirds, wild turkey, yellow-billed magpies, bends west, beckon toward the sea, lolling and shifting in wetland eddies, channeling a swath, Washington Boulevard and Biona Creek, stops at the rising Baldwin, Cheviot, and Beverly Hills, sprawls into wetlands, La Cienega, the Swamp Boulevard, collects its forces and cuts through the emerging hills, fills with rainwater flowing down the length of the Santa Monica Mountains, waters now carried in Biona Creek, fattens on streams and springs loosed along a ridge, uplifted by the Santa Monica Malibu Falls, Wilshire Boulevard, Veterans Memorial, University High School, and empties into the Pacific, Santa Monica Bay, to be cradled in the Biona Valley. Westchester Bluffs to Santa Monica Rise, Venice, Culver City, Marina del Rey, Playa del Rey. A luxurious coastal swamp softens the river's flood into the sea. A life-rich, wet greenery sprawling over 2,000 acres. Its tidal flood and regular washings cleans and nourishes the brackish midlands and salty lowlands where fish spawn and otters cavort. On the dry uplands, coyotes range and pronghorned antelope hop through coastal sage, browse among groves of cypress and Monterey pine. Native bees hum past the butterflies in its border thickets of willow and cottonwoods, live oak, alder, walnut, and sycamore. Birds migrate along the Pacific Flyway in flocks so dense they darken the sky. The Biona Wetlands, created by a river, a 52-mile-long river.
Certainly a different picture of the river than most people realize. I hope that we can get back to that beautiful natural state. You have so many incredible stories in your book, Sacred Sites, The Secret History of Southern California. I wish we could hear more of them. You mentioned the Biona Wetlands, and that's a very important estuary here in Southern California, Los Angeles County. You're a former member of the Board of Directors of the Wetlands Action Network. Is this area still threatened with development?
Yes, the multiple acreage that we managed to save against all odds is now threatened with what I would call phony restoration. Bring in the bulldozers. The idea is to recreate it according to somebody's idea of how it should be rather than how it actually is. Wetland restoration at best practices, largely done by hand. Very slowly, you repair or maybe perhaps take out non-indigenous plants, and then you wait and see how things go. You don't bring in the bulldozers and create it the way you think it should be. And the other problem with this unfortunate plan is that the wetlands has been left alone now for a while, and it has started to restore itself. Animals, plants, birds, all coming back. There's a flourishing life there. I mean, it's just extraordinary, all the life that is in the wetlands right now.
It's so beautiful. It's so wonderful. As an environmental activist, you have received numerous awards for your conservation efforts from the Santa Monica Conservancy, the Sierra Club. What are some of the current ecological concerns that we need to be more aware of?
Here in Southern California, we need to think about water. We need to really look at water and how we misuse it so profoundly. There's actually lots of water here, oddly. This is not a desert. It's a Mediterranean climate. There's a very large aquifer. We have many streams and springs actually still flowing, even in this drought, but the water is lost and shipped into culverts and out to the sea.
And we've paved over so much that the water can't go into that aquifer.
That's right, and keep it clean. So we need to rethink water in this area. And the other thing we need to look at, besides, of course, oil and gas production in Southern California, which is just destroying mostly low-income neighborhoods. For example, at the Biona Wetlands. Underneath the Biona Wetlands, SoCalGas has a big storage field. It's not necessary. It leaks. It's a real problem, but they're the driving force behind this phony restoration because they want to keep that gas field.
We certainly have to recognize the resources that we have and protect our air, land, and water. You authored the book Wisdom of the East. You've taken major spiritual beliefs from Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, Taoism, and you have shared some of those. What is the major wisdom that we can extract regarding protecting our Earth?
Care for all beings.
Your new book, Dear Traveler, sounds like a letter, but it's a collection of poems. Can you share one?
Yes, this poem is titled What the Fire Said. Traveler, after the sweltering summer, after ash sifting down from the burial grounds, open the gate. Then tell me, what did the fire say? Wall, my wind-marched fortress, air ripped from every lung, rapturous rocketing light, writhing forests, no longer trees, heralds. Tongue, hot prods plunge down water-worn ravines, fire lips smacking, powered to eat everything. Roar, terrifying trees until they split, sap fed to the fire. Ash, pooled pink coat hanger, doe's head trapped in a white plastic bucket. She can't shake it loose. She stumbles. Ashes, ashes, fire collapses. What did the birds say? We did not say blue sky, your sky. We did not say gray or black, your sky. We did not say mottled clouds, your sky. We did not say flame. We did not say shame. What did the plants say? Fire burst scorched seeds onto the prepared ground, resting, waiting for rain to root and breathe. We need you to breathe out. We need you to breathe in. You need us to breathe out. You need us to breathe in. We're breathing. But you are blue and slumped. You've sent in the flames yet again. You've taken the breathing animals with you. What did the animals say? Animals beneath a rock, animals under the planters, animal cities in your visceral caverns. What you can't see, you don't name. What you don't name, you can't see. And when you do, you stamp us possessed. But take your time. Shoot yourselves to far outer space. Let the stars chew on you, celestial bovine burners. What did the horses say? Tread trammeled the pasture. Heat soured the grass. The bist tasted like bullets. We fled and found refuge with outriders. What did the dolphins say? We see through the dirt to the base of your spine, your haven of fists, the hull of your mind. When you don't sing to us, salt water reaches up and up to capture your eyes, rebirth your hearts. There were seasons when you danced with us, when we shared with you our visions seen in depths where you are blind. How the earth loves. We loved you.
I want to thank you so very much for sharing. Thank you for being my guest.
Oh, my pleasure, Nancy. Thank you very much.
I have been speaking with Susan Suntree, who is a multiple award-winning poet, writer, and performer, author, and environmental activist. I'm Nancy Pearlman. Thank you very much for joining us, and do tune in again next week.
If you would like free information about these environmental issues, go to www.ecoprojects.org or call 310-559-9160. Environmental Directions with your host, Nancy Pearlman, is a community affairs program of the nonprofit organization Educational Communications and this station.